Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Terre, Haute. This congregation welcomes all people, regardless of their age, religion, race, nationality, ability, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, or anything else that has been used to divide people. We are a group of people with our own opinions, our own ideas, our own dreams. But we share ideals. We share a common belief in a liberal religion. In our discussions, we may disagree with each other, but we must always remember that what unites us is stronger than what separates us. We must always end the service aware of the love that we have for each other.
The fifth principle of Unitarian Universalism is the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. In our religious lives, the democratic process requires trust in the development of each individual conscience, a belief that such developments is possible for each of us, as well as a commitment to cultivate our own conscience. We could call it a commitment to the value of each person. In the words of Theodore Parker, democracy means not, I am as good as you are, but you are as good as I am. My connection with the sacred is only as precious as my willingness to acknowledge the same connection in others. And I think this is very pertinent in what's going on these days. This is from Reverend Parisa Parsa, Executive Director of the Public Conversations Project for the UU, larger organization. Today's opening words are number 461 in the back of your hymnal. This is a responsive reading. We must be saved. Nothing worth doing is completed in our lifetime.
Therefore, we are saved by hope.
Nothing true or beautiful or good makes complete sense in any immediate context of history.
Therefore, we are saved by faith.
Nothing we do, however virtuous, can be accomplished alone.
Therefore, we are saved by love.
No virtuous act is quite as virtuous from the standpoint of our friend or foe as from our own.
Therefore, we are saved by the final form of love, which is forgiveness.
Reinhold Niebuhr.
As once I
Transitional Words are number 649. Again, this is a responsive reading. From generation to generation, in a house which becomes a home, one hands down and another takes up the heritage of mind and heart, laughter and tears, musings and deeds.
Love, like a carefully loaded ship, crosses the gulf between the generations.
Therefore, we do not neglect the ceremonies of our passage when we wed, when we die, and when we are blessed with a child.
When we depart and when we return, when we plant and when we harvest.
Let us bring our children. It is not the place of some official to hand them their heritage.
If others impart to our children our knowledge and ideals, they will lose all of us that is wordless and full of wonder.
Let us build memories in our children, lest they drag out joyless lives, lest they allow treasures to be lost because they have not been given the keys.
We live not by things, but by the meanings of things. It is needful to transmit the past words from generation to generation.
Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. And now, as always, I am delighted to introduce our speaker, Reverend Bill Breeden. He is a past minister at the UU congregation in Bloomington, and yet has been with us for many, many years. And we are so glad to still have the privilege and honor of his presence.
It's good to be with you again today. I have to show you a gift I received from Dottie. It's actually for Glenda. It's a Sandinista doll. And if you probably know that Glenda and I both traveled to Nicaragua during the Contra Wars in the Reagan administration. And I think Glenda may have spoken about that before here. If she hasn't, you should ask her to. I won't tell her stories. She tells them better than I can. But she went in 1986 with a group called Witness for Peace, and it's her first trip out of the United States. She spent 2 weeks in the war zone, was in a small village where a Contra mine had blown up a school bus and killed 13 children. And the reason Glenda went was because Witness for Peace and other peace groups discovered that if Americans were in the villages, the Contras would not attack for fear of killing Americans, and awakening Congress's conscience to the illegal war that we were waging in Nicaragua. And so she spent 2 weeks down there. It was a life-changing experience, and she will be absolutely delighted to get a Sandinista doll. I don't want to give the impression that the Sandinistas were perfect. None of them were. I don't know anybody has a perfect government or perfect leaders, but the Sandinistas struggled with people, the church struggled with the people of Nicaragua to overthrow Somoza, who was a vicious dictator that had been supported by the United States for decades. Little history. Well, as I said, it's good to be back here. I'm honored to be a guest preacher at Terre, Haute, speaker, preacher. I have to admit that preaching remains a daunting exercise for me even after all these years. I started, as you who come here often know, at the age of 15, preaching in tent revivals, and they're sermons you would not want to hear, I guarantee you. And I remember preparing for my first act of civil disobedience. It was actually during the Jimmy Carter administration. Can you believe that? And I happen to think that Jimmy Carter was one of the greatest presidents in American history. He didn't bomb a single other country in 4 years. But he brought back the registration for the draft, and me and 4 women decided to chain ourselves up in the post office in protest of the return of the draft. And Carter was smart enough to order all across the nation that there be no arrest. So we sit there for 10 hours chained up in the post office, and nobody really cared. And I don't know why I brought that up, except to say preaching has always been kind of a lifespan thing for me, and yet it's always rather daunting that people are interested in anything I say. Preaching in a UU congregation is especially daunting because I don't care what you're talking about. There's always at least 3 people out there who know more about it than you do, and that's a tough assignment. Back in the old days, it wasn't that tough. The anxiety, the dauntingness, the anxieties you sometimes feel about preaching often shows up in dreams. I'm going to share a dream with you that Glenda wonders about the wisdom of sharing, but she shared it with her 94-year-old holiness grandmother, and so I'm sure if my 94-year-old mother-in-law can deal with it, so can a bunch of UUs. When she was told about it, all she did was kind of say, that doesn't sound too good. Anyway, the dream awakened me in a cold sweat. As background, one should know that I'd been cutting and splitting wood for from the more than 2 dozen trees that we lost in a tornado on our place, on our driveway and our lake road, and 5 around my son's house that missed his house, and 3 around our house that missed our house, and 3 on top of our barn, but not enough to do structural damage. So I've been doing woodwork, not woodwork shaping anything, but cutting and splitting for more than 2 weeks now. And so I was exhausted, and that might have added to the dream. I don't know. I dreamed I was preaching. At that particular dream, I was preaching at UU Church in Bloomington, the pulpit. And being exhausted, I wanted to try to explain, any problems I might have getting through it. And I wanted to say, my wagon is dragging. But out of my mouth it said, my dragon is wagging. And I said, no, I didn't mean that. I say, my dragon is wagging. And I woke up in a cold sweat. I don't know how to interpret that dream. I might seek counseling, but it'll probably end up being with some Freudian person, and I don't know what they'd come with that. Anyway, my wagon's still dragging, to be honest with you, because that's what I'm doing every day is cleaning up storm damage, and which is work I kind of enjoy, to be honest with you. It's physical labor, and I've always liked it, but it wears you out. The silver lining is that I have enough firewood already for the next 2 years, and probably will have enough for the next 5 years before I'm finished. Just a little interlude first about the night of the storm we had. We were at my twin brother's house about 25 miles from our place, and we stayed there playing a card game till about 10 o'clock, and we knew there were storms coming, and I thought, well, maybe we ought to head home. And within 2 miles of Daryl's house, it was raining so hard that I could only drive 12 miles an hour. It ended up taking us 3.5 hours to get home from 25 miles, and I ended up in a ditch. I came to a tree in the road twice and had to go around different ways, and finally was within a mile of our house, and a tree was across the road. I couldn't get by, so I decided to turn around again and try to find another way in, and I backed into a ditch. And our car was sitting at about a 30-degree angle. We're sitting there staring up at the windshield and wondering what to do now. The front wheels were just barely touching the ground. And along came a bunch of guys with chainsaws, as it usually happens out in the country, and trying to clear the road. And I got out and drug brush with them, and finally got it cleared out where we could get one car through. And sitting in front of me was a big 4-wheel drive truck, one of them big bad trucks that blows out diesel smoke when it takes off, and big pipes in the back, and Confederate flags on the windows. And, it's a big 4-wheel drive. I drive a little Matrix out here. You can see it. I could probably, if I had 3 guys to help push, I could have pushed it out. I don't know. But it was pouring down rain, and I thought, well, maybe that guy will give me a lift. He backs up, and this young guy come walking over, and he said, well, I asked that guy with the big truck to pull you out, and he said he couldn't do it because of liability. I said, really? And so the young man says, I think I'll pull you out. I got a tow strap. And I expected him to come up in a pickup. He drives up in a 1990 Subaru hatchback that looked like it had been through World War III. I mean, it's a beat-up car. And I got out, and I said, man, I don't think you can pull me out of here with that thing. He said, oh, yeah, I think I can. It was like the little engine that could. Those of you who are old enough to remember that story. And he hooked on to me, and when he pulled, it pulled my front end down enough that my wheels grabbed, and he popped right out of the ditch. So I jumped out of the car, and I said, "Can I pay you?" And he said, "I didn't do it for pay." And I said, "Well, I know I wouldn't really enjoy paying you if you did." But I gave him $40, and he thought it was a lot of money, and he opened up the back of his Subaru, and it's full of riprap. Riprap is big rocks, if you know what that is. He had it loaded up with riprap. And it reminded me of my experience in life is that the poor people are much more generous than the rich people. That's just a fact. And you can ask any waitress in town, any wait service, they get bigger tips from the poor people than they get from people with a lot of money. They just do. And that's something strange about that. And it's a benefit, it's a testament to the integrity of people who don't have much. Change. I want to talk about change. We've kind of been in doldrums the last year and a half, almost 2 years now, with this pandemic and all kinds of things. Heraclitus, one of those Clitus brothers from the Greek world, said, "The only constant is change." If you had an introduction to philosophy, you remember that name and the names of other Greeks whose activity did not consist of keg parties and tailgating, but rather of philosophical speculation. The secret of change, says Socrates, is to focus all your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. And I began thinking about that and the aftermath of this storm, how things changed around our land and so forth. I want to talk a little bit about reacting to change and how most of the time we react to change on our short-term memory stuff, just what happened yesterday, just what happened last week. And short-term memory's something that, as you get older, you get less of. I know all of you, a lot of you know. I may have told you this joke before, but a good joke can be told more than once. About the three couples who were having dinner one night, and they were from my generation or older, and it was of that generation where when the dinner is over, the women, clean up and they talk in the kitchen, and the guys go back in the den and smoke cigars and drink a little whiskey and talk about important things that guys talk about. And there are all three guys sitting back there, and one of them says, "We went out to dinner last week, and it's the best meal I've ever had in my life. It's a new restaurant. The service was impeccable. The chef came out to see us. The presentation was absolute. The wine was great. It is the best meal I've ever eaten in my life, and the price was decent." And one of his friends says, "Well, what's the name of it? We like to eat out. I'll call and get reservations." He said, "I don't know. I can't remember the name of it. It's a new restaurant way out past the mall, about 2 miles. It's just out there." He said, "Well, how can I get reservations if I don't know the name of it?" "Think, man, think." And the old man's thinking, and he said, "What's the name of that flower that you buy a dozen of to give to, when your wife's mad at you or something?" One of the guys says, "You mean a rose?" He said, "Rose, that's it." He said, "Rose, what's the name of that restaurant we ate at last week?" And that's sort of how short-term memory goes. It just leaves you. What I'd like to do is point out the fact that if we remember our long-term memory, if we hang on to it, if we reflect on who we are long-term, we react less to short-term. And we go through change all the time. How we react to it is what matters. Billy Collins has a poem which I'd like to read to you. It's called "The Future." If you don't have Billy Collins on your shelf, get him. He was a poet laureate. He was also invited to the White House to have a symposium on poetry of Emily Dickinson, and I can't remember the other one they were looking at, both of whom prominent poets, but Laura Bush, George Bush's wife, invited him and said, this was during the time when we were getting ready to go to war in Afghanistan, and Laura Bush says, "I don't want any poetry, I don't want anything that mentions war." And Billy Collins refused to go and began a group called Poets for Peace, and this is not part of that poetry, but that's the kind of man he was. The future. When I finally arrive there, and it will take many days and nights, I would like to believe others will be waiting, and might even want to know how it was. So I will reminisce about a particular sky, or a woman in a white bathrobe, or the time I visited a narrow strait where a famous naval battle had taken place. Then I would spread out on a table a large map of the world and explain to the people of the future in their pale garments what it was like, how mountains rose between valleys, and this was called geography, and how boats loaded with cargo plied the rivers, and this was known as commerce, and how the people from the pink area and this crossed over into this light green area and set fires and killed whoever they found, and this was called history. And they will listen, mild-eyed and silent, as more of them arrived to join the circle, like ripples moving toward, not away from, a stone tossed into a pond. Like ripples moving toward, not away from, a stone crossed into a pond. We like things to be calm. We like things to be fixed. We like things to not change. And what Collins is saying is the people of the future are going to move toward this to understand. And I think that's what we have to do. We have to not run away from the ripples in the pond, because there will be ripples. We like things to stay there. We like to believe what we believe. Give me my Agnes slide up here. I don't know if you get Agnes in your newspaper or not. I take the daily paper out of Bloomington when it shows up, primarily for two reasons: the crossword puzzle and the comics, and or the funnies they call them, I think, when they're in the paper. Agnes says, "Can I get it all?" There you go. Thank you. If you've seen USOs, tell me what they look like. Well, they look like silvery, skinny toasters. They shimmer and they glow and they poop out light balls, and then they vanish. Agnes says, "I want to believe." And her partner in crime, the other little girl, says, "That's why I can pretty much say anything I want." There's a big difference in belief and faith. Niebuhr said we are saved by faith. He didn't say we are saved by belief. And you can turn on the radio and the television almost any day of the week, and especially on Sunday, and hear preachers talking about what you need to believe to be saved. Niebuhr says you are not saved by belief, you are saved by faith. And that comic, when she says, "I want to believe," reminds me of a story. Glenda came back from her relatives visiting her 94-year-old grandmother, who actually enjoyed my dream. But, they come from where I came from, the holiness tradition, where they have to believe 7 impossible things before breakfast to be saved. And I don't buy that anymore, but this cartoon reminded me of a story she told. Her brother, who's a college graduate, taught high school, educated person by degree, came back and told a story of a missionary friend of his who went to Ethiopia and came back and said he found there's a place in Ethiopia where they have the footprints of Jesus as a child. And he said it's scientifically proven. What do you mean by scientifically proven? What it really means is I want to believe. They don't believe in vaccines. They don't believe in wearing masks. They don't believe in the science of medicine today, but they believe science proves that Jesus as a baby walked in Ethiopia. You've got to really want to believe that. They also came back from a trip to the Holy Land. I love the Palestinian people. I've been on the West Bank spent almost 3 weeks there during the last Intifada. And some of the most wonderful people I've ever met. And they remind me of the Navajos, and their hospitality is built into their DNA. But they also know how to make a buck off of Christians. They're really good at it. They traveled out into the desert, a busload of Christians. And they got out in the desert out there in the West Bank, and there's a bush there, and some Palestinians all out there to greet them. And they said, "This is the very bush that Moses saw burning." And it's the only place on the planet that this bush grows. And they sell rocks with lightning strikes on them. I think it was painted on. I saw one. I think it was actually painted. And they said, this is the only place on the planet that these rocks are found. Geologists can't find them anywhere on the planet. And I went back to Agnes. I want to believe. I don't want to believe. I want to have faith. Faith in my community. Faith in the grace of life. Faith in the midst of uncertainty. And I want to quit seeking knowledge. I want to seek wisdom. Because knowledge is a black hole. In the midst on the change and turmoil, it's good to reflect on long-term memory. The Dalai Lama says there are only 2 days. What happens when we strictly deal with short-term memory is we react and we want to change what has happened. We want to change things. And we regret. And we go around with feelings of regret of how bad we did or what we missed. The Dalai Lama says there are only 2 days in the year that nothing can be done. One is called yesterday, and the other is called tomorrow. So today is the right day to love. Alan Watts said real religion is the transformation of anxiety into laughter. Alan Watts was a great American Buddhist writer. No amount of anxiety, he says, makes any difference to anything that is going to happen. You are the universe experiencing itself. Hurrying and delaying are like ways of trying to resist the present. Insecurity is a result of trying to be secure. I picked up this book this morning when I got up, and I looked up the day. This is a book that my friend on federal death row reads every morning. We've read it for 5 years together. It's kind of one of those perpetual meditation books that only gives the date, not the day of the week, so you don't realize. And he reads it every day, and every year he'll come up with a new one that spoke to him differently. This one is called The Moon and the Dewdrop on July 11th, and is a quote from Dogen, a Zen Buddhist. Enlightenment is like the moon reflected in a dewdrop on a blade of grass. The moon does not get wet, nor is the drop of water broken, and the whole moon and the entire sky are reflected in even one drop of water. The mystery, says Mark Nepo, as he was dying with a brain cancer when he wrote this, the mystery in love and work in any moment of oneness is that, like the dewdrop and the moon, we are briefly ourselves and everything at once. Our essential nature is not changed, it is only enhanced. The secret to change is to remember who we are, is to focus all our energy, says Socrates, not on fighting the old, but building the new. And finally, let me see. Oh, I have another slide. I want to talk about change. Give me that other slide. I'd use Facebook for the comics. I don't get to all these. And this one is really good. Honestly, if I knew how long it would be until they got home, I would tell you. That's Alexa, of course. If I knew when they were coming home, I would tell you. How much has changed in our lifetime? My goodness. I used to have to go to the dictionary, used to have to go to all kinds of resources to find something. Now I can pick up my phone on a good day when I have good reception in Owen County, and I can say, Siri, tell me this. And Siri will give me an answer. Or Alexa. And I'm afraid some of what is happening is we're losing the wisdom to seek answers from other people, from real life right in front of us. And of course, we've been barred from that for a year and a half or so. But we need not to miss the human connection. Even in our own families, I think a lot of people are spending more time with Alexa or with Facebook, and sometimes by necessity, but even in people who are living together. spend more time talking to Alexa than they do their own partner. And we need to understand that that's not really the way we're designed to live as human beings. I have another poem I'd like to share with you. It's by Grant Peoples. He's a musician and poet from Florida, a good friend of mine. You may have seen, I don't know if you've seen the, there's a T-shirt he made up, which I immediately, when I saw it, I called him and said, send me one of those. It reads, sometimes there's not enough poison in the Kool-Aid. And it's just a satirical way of saying, you know, some things aren't crazy enough to kill you. A message from my mirror. What you see here, sandwiched between what you had for breakfast and the day you breathe your last, is all you've got. So be cautious, because what you're seeing isn't you as you are, but you backward and in reverse. A refracted spectacle, a pantomime in chemical and cellular transformation. So don't trust what you are seeing, be it beauty or blemish. No, you are never going to nail you down, not by looking at me. You won't. Instead, you won't. Instead, you must take leave and abandon me forever to search elsewhere for your center, for the soul of how you matter. He's looking in the mirror, and the mirror says to him, this is not you. You must search elsewhere for your center, your soul, of why you matter. I really believe that we have to find sometimes, we have to recognize the fact that who we see in the mirror is not really us. What is really us is the person reflected in the eyes of others. It is the person who sees us as we really are. And we will know that simply by being in community with one another. That's how we find it. Our short-term memory will react to things in community many times negatively. The Bloomington Church right now is going through some radical change in personnel and so forth, and it's a difficult time. And it's easy to just react to those things in negative ways. But if we go back and reflect on who we are and why we are here, it will temper our reaction. And I really believe if you look at the history of this little community here, you know, as I've said many times, first time I ever saw the Terre, Haute community was in a handball court down at the YWCA. And what you've done in this community and building this building and what you're doing as a community is important. And you'll go through changes, you'll go through disagreements, but as your reading said, who we are this morning that you shared with us, when you leave here, remember who you are. Remember why you came. Most people do not come to a Unitarian Universalist Church just for some personality. We're not a cult of personalities. Ministers come and ministers go. Leaders come and leaders go. We're not a cult of personalities. Most people come to Unitarian Universalism because they don't want to have to believe 7 impossible things before breakfast. They don't want their children taught to believe 7 impossible things before breakfast. They don't want their children to see the world broken into us and them, but to understand that we are a world community. They don't want their children to be taught to worship nations, but to worship truth and to hear the truth. That's why we're here. A liberal religious community is necessary in our nation. We can have an impact on our communities and our lives. And I want to say the shock of a police officer being shot in Terre, Haute last week, was it? Shocked me. I know an awful lot of police officers. I've had police officers protect my right to protest many times. And I know there are police officers who don't live up to the job. And I'm thankful that the justice system at least has addressed one of those in Minnesota. But we live in a nation that is being torn apart by hatred, by division, by certainty. And it needs to hear from the community of believers who think we are not saved by belief. We are saved by our faith in one another, by our faith in the possibility of justice, by our faith in the possibility that maybe, just perhaps maybe, the change that's going on right now in our families, in our communities, means that this coming generation may bring about a day where justice is real for all of us. Black, white, straight, gay, trans, I don't care. We are one community. And I believe very strongly that Unitarian Universalist has a place in our community, has work to do, and this community has work to do. So remember your history. Remember long-term why you came, and look forward to the future. And when a stone is cast into the pond, don't run away from the ripples. Run to them and make a difference in the lives of others. Blessed be. Now our closing hymn. Hymn number 181. No matter if you live now far or near. That's a beautiful song that I didn't know, but the words are absolutely wonderful, and I invite you to read them. We'll have to sing it again. I'll tell Betsy we'll work that one out again. And I thank Betsy for recording songs for us. Sometimes I don't record songs actually, but she had those today, and I'm kind of glad to learn new songs. Our closing words. Number 698. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You're not alone. Take courage. You're not alone.
May the blessings of love rest upon you. May peace abide with you. May God's presence illuminate your heart now and forevermore.
Go in peace, know that you are loved and that your life is sacred.